This is the Sales Bible Podcast, episode 307, Discovering Your Sales Blind Spots, an interview with Mark Sellers.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And I was wondering if you'd ever done a SWOT analysis on yourself. You know, like listing out your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, the threats. Probably not. And if you did decide to do such an activity, when it came to the weaknesses, you would probably miss a few because all of us have blind spots, things that we're not aware of that exist, yet they stop us from emotionally connecting with others. That's this week's topic with guest Mark Sellers. He's the author of a new book titled Blind Spots. In this week's episode, we're going to learn about our blind spots and how to become the leaders that we aspire to be. Now make sure and listen all the way to the end because we have another Sales Nexus sales tip: nurture your leads. So with that said, and no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Mark. Are you ready to babble?
I am ready to babble, Pat.
Mark, you got a brand new book out here. I got it in my hand, Blind Spots, The Hidden Killer of Sales Coaching. Really fun book. I read it, and let me start with a quote from you. How's that sound?
Terrific.
It says that you discovered that managers are unaware of behaviors that they consistently commit and prevent them from delivering effective coaching and developing stronger relationships with their salespeople, and that you call these behaviors blind spots, right?
Yes. That was true, and I wrote that about, or published it actually, about 4 months ago, and it's still true today. Yeah, that's really the essence, Pat, of blind spots. Basically, they are behaviors that people don't know they commit. In this case, my world is sales management and sales leadership. I basically work with small to medium-sized businesses, so I might work with the GM, the president or owner, and I might work with the frontline sales manager. So all those guys and gals included here, they don't know they commit these behaviors, and therefore we call them blind spots. But more than that, they are behaviors that get in the way of creating an emotional connection with the people they're leading and coaching, and that's a problem.
This is really why I wanted to have you on, because not everybody who listens on Sales Babblers, this is selling secrets for non-seller kinds of people who are new to sales. So not everybody here is a sales manager. But a lot of sales managers do listen to Sales Babble, and a lot of people have sales managers. So I thought this would be a great conversation of like what you should be doing to coaching your people and what you should be expecting of your boss to be coaching you.
I like that. Yes. I mean, look, this is a two-way street, right? I mean, I think as salespeople, maybe we can get frustrated sometimes when our managers aren't doing what we want them to do. And, do we know how to respond? It's almost like, all the negotiation training companies are working with the purchasing departments and have been for years, right? So then the salesperson shows up and they know all the tricks. What happened? So I think it's a great idea of yours. So hopefully we can give some good tips to your salespeople audience today.
Cool beans. So let's start with the definition. What's a blind spot?
A blind spot is behavior that a person doesn't realize he or she commits. It's an unflattering behavior at a minimum. It could be destructive, damaging, really nasty behavior. In some cases, they don't know they exhibit that prevents that person from creating an emotional connection. So that's the formal definition.
I liked in your book that you said it's something you can't see, but everybody else can.
Oh man, it's crazy. So I mean, we're just going to roll with this as we talked about. I gave a talk at our local chamber about a week ago, and in the middle of it, looking for comments and questions and things, and this woman says, "I got one for you. We got this guy in my office, and he's trying to tell me and everybody else to do X, Y, and Z." And everybody's looking at him like he's nuts, and he has no idea that he's nuts. And so this was really interesting, Mark, she said. So it is really fascinating. I mean, when I talk about the personal blind spot that I had that really, really drove me to write the book, I had two major ones. One that really changed my business after 15 years. Okay. So you're never too old, right, for something new and exciting to happen. And the second one changed my life. And I talk about these blind spots as being right in front of my face the entire time. And I'm sure that other people saw them, and I couldn't see them for the life of me.
So what were they?
So the first one was, what I do for a living. I do sales coaching and training. And, to make this real specific, I dial in, a manager dials in, a sales rep dials in, and they go through a funnel audit conversation, which is a pipeline review that I've created. It takes about 45 to 60 minutes, and I listen to the manager lead that funnel audit conversation. We hang up, and then the manager and I talk about how well he or she ran that conversation. Okay, and so we give immediate feedback. It's very objective, and if I listen to 2 or 3 or 4 of these a day from one manager, then we can see patterns. And it becomes a very, very insightful conversation for the manager. Okay. So one day I'm listening to these, and it just, again, these are kind of blinding flashes of the obvious, I think, or divine inspiration, take your pick. I suddenly am sitting here thinking, I'm hearing the mood of the salesperson. I'm hearing that she's checked out. I'm hearing that she's no longer connecting with this manager. She's no longer wanting to listen to him. She's not inspired by him, etc. And it's the first time I had heard that, because I had been focused so much on the mechanics of the conversation and making sure that manager was doing the mechanics well. And so that led me to continue to listen again for other, things like that in future conversations. And no surprise, the more and more I listened for something, guess what? I heard it. So that led me to say, what the manager really needs is they need coaching for the whole person, not just the mechanics of how to have a good funnel audit conversation. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. But then I said, but I'm not qualified to do that. Really to get inside the head of that person and maybe talk to that person personally and know what pressures and things are on the mind of the manager. I'm just not, kind of part psychologist, maybe part therapist. I'm not qualified to do that. But I was convinced that that's what my clients needed.
I really liked. Can I stop you for a second here?
Yes, sure.
Because I want to compliment you on something here. Because you've kind of gone right to the back of your book. You have these questions that sales managers commonly ask their salespeople about their funnel, and it is just painful to read.
Yep.
And it's like, to go to the lady that you were talking about, her only thought was, when's this going to be over?
Mm-hmm.
When can I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
I got work to do. This moron doesn't know when doesn't have the slightest idea.
You're spot on, man. And isn't that scary? You've got, let's say you run a business and you're relying on, let's say you run a small business, a $50 million, $100 million company, and you've got, a dozen salespeople, and you have a manager or two. I mean, that's such a pivotal role. I mean, I when people hire me to do my funnel principle training and stuff, I say, look, this thing will succeed or fail not because of me. It will succeed or fail because of the leadership of the frontline sales managers. So that's why we spend a lot of time with them in rolling out that part of our service. But that's and so if people aren't attuned to that, then you've got not just the frontline sales managers. We'll give them a break. Any sales leader up the whole food chain, if they're not keyed into how they're coming across, again, that's kind of what this is about, right? You don't know how you're coming across. If you don't know that, if you have low EQ, if you don't have high self-awareness, then it can be scary. So that led, I want to tell you real briefly what led to the second blind spot. So I said, I know my sales manager clients need this, but I'm not qualified to give it to them. So I'm just going to, frankly, I'm just going to still kind of plug away. I didn't make it a mission to try to be able to do that because I really didn't think I could do it. So it's like, well, whatever. So the second blind spot was in Singapore. And this is where I'm doing all this training for a client and I'm feeling great. And I get dropped off at the hotel at the end of the day and I'm by myself. I'd had dinner with the client and I go up to my room and I'm looking out over this beautiful Marina Bay in downtown Singapore at night. And I'm just feeling like I'm on top of the world because I just published this Funnel Principle book about 4 years before that. And Selling Power Magazine said it was a top 10 best book to read. And Garrett Schwantner said it was revolutionary. And I'm going, okay, whatever, if you say so. And I got clients who are paying me to go to these exotic places, and I'm getting some peer recognition. And like I said, I'm just feeling on top of the world. And then I turned away from that view, and I walked over to the side of my hotel bed, and I started to cry. And I'm like, what the hell? What the hell is wrong with me? You know, it was the most tormenting emotion I've ever had, feeling like I just said. And then on the other hand, I'm feeling like, what's wrong? You know? So I kind of shadow boxed with that for the next, you know, frankly, for the next 2 years, trying to figure out what the heck is wrong with me. And I concluded that I was living a really self-absorbed life, putting everything behind me, putting me and my pursuits, mainly my business, but frankly, everything, ahead of everything else, including my family. Now, if you'd asked me at the time, you know, Mark, you're putting your family, I got 3 kids, been married 30 years, you're putting your family behind you? I would have said, of course not. I'm doing all of this for my family. But that was really BS. I was doing it all for me. And so when I had that after 2 years of that so-called shadow boxing, right, I concluded that, and man, was that liberating. But then I had to say, okay, well, where's the manual and the roadmap for how to live the rest of my life? Fast forward a little bit, okay, so this is all personal, but how does this apply to my business? So I started to see the blind spots of my clients, and that was what I could not see before when I had that first blind spot. So now I'm starting to see them. I mean, really see them, Pat. I mean, like, okay, I see them. I understand them, right? And I'm saying, I wonder if they want me to introduce this idea to them, because I know what it did for me. It transformed my life. And I know I'm also a better coach and a trainer and a consultant as a result of that, let alone a better husband and a father and a friend and everything. So I started to introduce this idea to them, and they were rocked. They loved my Singapore story. And then we got rolled up the sleeves and got to work, okay, on their blind spots. So that led to me seeing all these people, these grown men and women who hired me to coach them and train them in their teams, see the transformations that some of them have made. It just rocked me. There's nothing more important that I've ever done in my professional life than this blind spots work. So I said, I got to write a book on this. So that's how the book came about. And we have a little bit of a platform, not to go commercial on you, but we do, provide services related specifically to try and to get, grown men, grown women, sales leaders to be better coaches and leaders through some content that I've created in the spirit of this blind spots idea. So with that, I will pause.
I think you've done a good job of kind of explaining the situation, and I can certainly identify with that. It's kind of like golfing. You almost need somebody outside of you to take a look and see where your hands are at and where your body is at. It's not something that you can fully experience within yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of the solutions, or what's some of the advice that you're giving your clients that maybe you could share with the audience, some things that we can do some things that we can take away and maybe start executing on to improve our lives?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, what's really key, and if I can take a half a step back before I give you 3 or 4 things. I think what I'm trying to do with people, and yes, through the book, try to get people to understand, because understanding is really key. If I just give people, not today, I will, but if somebody wanted to hire me and say, hey, give me some top 10 things, Mark, I need to be doing, I'd say, there's a little more work involved in that. Okay. So the work involved is really dealing with your ego. So many things are ego related. My, self-absorption was ego related. If I'm mad at the neighbor, it's probably ego related. If I'm got a beef with my wife or my kids, it's probably ego related. And so what we have to do is, number one, here's number one tip. You got to be brutally honest with yourself. And when you're trying to discover what your blind spots are, if you are brutally honest, and to your point about the golf analogy, you're going to need help. You're going to need a set of outside eyes, guaranteed. But if you are brutally honest, then you can get so much closer to who you really are. And we see it all the time in business, sales leaders who put on appearances. Why? Because they've grown up that way. They've grown up thinking that that's what they have to do to be the leader that they think they are, or that's what they have to do to get the promotion, or that's what they have to do to motivate or inspire somebody. And that's mostly ego-driven kind of stuff. So, and ego keeps us from ourselves. Jordan Peterson, great book, 12 Rules of Life. I quote him in my book. The you that you think is you is not you. So, what we want to do is get sales leaders closer to the real you. And when you get brutally honest with yourself, then you'll do that. So that would be number one. Number two, vulnerability plays a key part of this. How do you get closer to the real you? You do that by becoming more vulnerable. And yes, sales leaders becoming more vulnerable, learning that when you go first and share some things with your team that are obviously appropriate, your team is not your therapy group. Don't anybody get me wrong here. There is a line of what you share with your team, but when you share more about you with your team, then they will share more about them with you. I learned this from Mike Bosworth, an icon in sales training, the author of Solution Selling. He also wrote a book called What Great Salespeople Do. And I had the privilege about 6 years ago to sit in a very small room with Mike and have him do some sales training related to the book, What Great Salespeople Do. And in that book, he talks a lot about the power of vulnerability. I'm like, really? When was the last time you ever went through sales training and the facilitator took you through a topic on vulnerability, right? So I was, skeptical, and then he won me over because it was just so powerful. So when sales leaders can be vulnerable, they will get closer. They will get closer to who they really are, and they'll be more honest with themselves. And then their people will see that, and people really are inspired when they see their leaders be real, authentic people, not the fake people that they think they want their people to see. So I'd say that would be a second one. One that caught me with my kids, and I think that sales leaders can relate to this too. One of my kids, I should say, my middle daughter, Polly. Hi, Polly. I love you. She's 24 now, and I'm just so proud of her. She's done phenomenal things.
Does she listen to sales podcasts, though?
She does not, no. But, but if she does, I'll be safe anyway. So, she and I had a rocky relationship when she was in high school. And I credit that to her, not blame her. I credit that to her because she's so resourceful and tough. And I was determined to just basically fix her because I didn't see behaviors related to studying and organization. And every kid has a messy room, kind of, sort of, but it was more on the lines of putting things off at the last minute and just not being organized and apparently not really caring, because in my ego brain, I said, well, she doesn't care, because any knucklehead who cared would be organized. Any knucklehead who cared wouldn't wait till Sunday night to start a project that's due tomorrow at 8, And so that's the nastiness that and how I came across to her, right? So I saw her as a problem to be fixed, not a very loving thing, right? So again, back to sales leaders, when you have salespeople, let's just say you have one who really drives you crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if you just think this person is a problem and you got to fix this person. Otherwise, you're going to have to fire him or her. And I would coach those sales leaders to first really see this person maybe in a different light, not as a problem to be fixed, but what do they do well sales-wise that may be a place to start, and then build from there. Typically what I find is that they don't do sales the way the sales manager did sales. That's why the manager thinks that she or he's a problem to be fixed. But sales managers, hey, listening sales managers, you got to recognize there are a lot of different ways to get to the end, right? Some people are disorganized, but man, they are so in the moment that when they're with somebody, that customer thinks that they're the only person in the world. And right then and there, they are for that salesperson. That, I'll tell you, Pat, that's something I've struggled with, being in the moment. I'm so thinking ahead. I'm so planning, right? But if you can tap that and then maybe help, let's say somebody who is so good at being in the moment, but is needing help on the disorganization. I got a guy in Houston who manages a manager in Houston, works for an this is a construction company. I have 3 clients in Houston. This one works for the construction company. And he's got a rep who told me, he says, I do a terrible job of being organized. Terrible. But can that guy sell? You better believe it. So the manager, smart guy, he gets that. So he works on helping this guy with his organization. And he keeps a top producer, A-player guy on his team. So that's how this thing can work.
I loved the section of the book where you start walking through all that stuff with what's up with your pipeline? What's up with that deal? Last month you said it was this deal. What makes me think, why should I believe you?
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that resonates with you?
Because I've done it to people and I've had it done to me.
Okay.
And it doesn't really truly speak what's really going on with their funnel. It's kind of like, it's a bunch of data, but it really doesn't really speak to what's really going on in the market. Because lots of times what's really happening is companies truly don't know who their ideal client is. They're trying to figure that out. They don't really understand the buying process. They've invented a selling process, but not a buying process. And what I liked about, and it's a blind, it really honestly is a blind spot that the company and the organization has, and that the sales manager has, and that they're actually perpetuating necessarily the salespeople.
It's a culture thing,
right? And so this whole thing, there's no mindfulness, there's no awareness. I really liked your list here about, really being awake to what your ego is and what's right and what's wrong about it, being vulnerable, accepting people for where they're at and who they are, understanding, the parts that they play on the chessboard. This guy's a rook. That's all he's good at being a rook. Let's just let him be a rook, right?
Yeah, he'll never be a queen.
He's not going to be that. It's just not who he is.
That's funny you should say that. I tell people, it's like when I'm talking about this in some venue, I'll say, as much as in a previous life for me, as much as I would have loved to have been, a 6'1", 195 pound kind of dude, I'm a 5'7", 145, 50 pound kind of dude. And that's not going to change with the exception of the weight probably as I get older. But we can't turn, point guards into centers. We can't turn, offensive linemen into quarterbacks. It's just not,
No. And we should stop judging each other that I wish I was something else. And we should stop judging others. I wish you were something that you weren't. And we should stop judging ourselves that I wish I was something that I'm not. And that's just my stoicism coming through here. So,
well, I think that's probably, the beginning, again, think about the context of this, right? Coaching and leadership. And where are we looking to make an impact? We're trying to help a person who's a manager or a leader, whatever. We're trying to help him or her understand his or her people better. So maybe we have them take assessments. Maybe we talk mostly, it's one directional. And I know that that's not how it's always done, but that's not unusual. And what I'm saying is, it's kind of funny. I'm going to do a blog on this sometime soon. We really need to spend more time thinking about ourselves, right? Instead of, we talk about, you need to stop thinking about yourself. No, you need to spend a lot more time thinking about yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I just interviewed a guy yesterday on mindfulness in selling.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful.
And that's exactly what we talked about. You need to work on yourself before you can work on other people. Mark, people want to reach out to you and find you. How could they do that?
Well, they can call me, 614-571-8267. They can go to our website, www.breakthrough, breakthrough-sales.com. And then my email address is just mark@breakthrough-sales.com. So those are the quickest ways to get in touch with me. And as I tell people, love to hear from you, and a lot of sales managers out there, sales leaders, and in your case, sales people looking for their sales leaders to step up their game so that they can perform better. I'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in learning more about this topic.
Mark, thanks for visiting us here on Sales Babble. I really appreciate it.
Pat, thanks for inviting me. Nice talking with you.
Welcome back, Craig. Are you ready to babble a Sales Nexus sales tip?
I am ready.
So what's this week's tip, sir?
This week's tip is nurture your leads.
Nurture your leads. What do you mean by that?
I mean, all of those leads that you talk to day after day, month after month, that don't buy. Don't just throw them away. Stay in touch with them. In the old days, we used to call it, we'd have a tickler file, right? And we'd go through it, and maybe every 3 months, we'd call everybody back. But today, we don't have to do that. That's too much work. Now we can totally automate the whole thing, right? Everybody that I talk to today that says no, thankfully, most of them are not saying, "No way, Craig, go away. I will never do business with you," right? Most of them are saying things like, "Well, it's interesting, but we're under contract for the next year with somebody else, or our budget doesn't come up again for till the end of the year, or the decision maker's out of town." Whatever. It's usually just not right now. So be there when the time is right for them. Set up an automated email campaign that's just going to send them an email. Maybe it's only once a month or something. It doesn't have to be a lot. It doesn't have to be real complex. Just, "Hey, how you doing? Maybe here's a link to an interesting blog article." Maybe just, "Hey, is it time for us to reconnect?" Simple. Stay in touch.
And I bet you Sales Nexus could do that, right?
Oh yeah, of course. And here's the cool thing. What we see is that businesses that do this with just maybe a 2 email drip, a couple emails every month, they're going to see an increase in sales of 15 to 25% within 4 to 6 months every time it's tried.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Where can people find this week's sales tip, Craig?
All you got to do is go to salesnexus.com/sales. And there you can download a PDF of all of the Sales Babble sales tips. And you can also get a free copy of our 4 Steps to Market Domination guide.
I can't wait for next week's tip.
We will see you next week.
I just got a terrific LinkedIn message today. It's actually from Julia Shepard, one of the listeners of Sales Babble. And she said, quote, "I am graduating from university this May. I have limited experience with cold calling, interviews, and the overall sales process, but Sales Babble gave me key insights that helped me get multiple job offers. Really appreciate what you're doing." That is awesome, Julia. That is absolutely awesome. I am so excited to hear that. Just got a call today from Dr. Sean Green, and he wants me to come speak to his students about how to set up their LinkedIn profiles. I love helping college students out. And I love helping all of you out too. It's very gratifying. So if you'd like to connect with Mark, find a copy of his book, his website, you can find links to that and to the Sales Nexus sales tips in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/307. One of the best ways people hear about Sales Babble is from listener reviews. If you could go to your favorite podcast app and leave a 5-star comment, hey, I would really appreciate it. Word of mouth, just like what Julia did here today, word of mouth is how podcasts spread. Thanks again for setting aside a bit of your today. I know there's other things you could have done with your time, and I hope you didn't feel like you squandered it here. If you got any questions or comments about this episode or any episode, don't hesitate to reach out by clicking on the Babble Me button on the website. I'd love to hear what you think. That's all I got for today, guys and gals. Until next Tuesday, take care and have a highly successful and a profitable selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.
This is a production of Habanero Media.